Rock Solid Radio wants to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions. Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. They offer a wide selection of high-quality plants, landscaping materials, and home decor. They do amazing high-quality work and can help you transform your indoor and outdoor living spaces into something beautiful. So stop by Casey's Outdoor Solutions today and let them know you appreciate their support for Rock Solid Radio. Visit Casey's today at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana.
Welcome to Rock Solid Radio. I'm Linda Hutchinson, joined by my amazingly strong husband, Merle. Hi, honey.
Whoa, man. I feel like I'm...
You like that?
Yeah, well, yeah, but why?
Well, you know.
Why? Not why am I strong, but why are you saying that?
You know, it kind of goes back to our last week's show where we're talking about perspective and how I see you, and I see you amazingly strong.
Wow,
man.
You need to change your glasses.
No, seriously. Last week's show was a really good show, and if you didn't get a chance to go back, if you haven't had a chance, go back and listen. We did a whole show on perspective, and I've already assigned that as homework for some of my clients because we get stuck in our own narrative and some negative thinking patterns that really just, we're spinning our wheels and we feel like we're getting stuck in the muck. So this week's show is going to be another one. I have a feeling I'm going to be assigning it for homework because we talk about this a lot. And so we're going to be talking this week about resilience.
Man, I think this is going to be a great topic, mostly because there's always something there that is pulling on us, right?
Yep.
And if we don't understand what that is and then what it can lead to, we can really get ourselves in bad situations, which we've all been there before, right? But yeah, you know, the whole idea of perspective, going back to that, I think for me, it's important because that's part of our work as coaches and counselors, like getting to learn and perceptive of how other people are seeing things. Otherwise, you can't always help very well.
Right.
You know, you kind of get trapped in your own view. So part of what our training is to say, well, let me see where you're coming from here, right?
And why? Why are you going at it like that?
Yeah. And so that we can learn, and then maybe there's a way that we can shine a different light on it, see a different perspective. So it is really important. You know, Hannah, it reminds me of a little bit of scripture in Romans 12:1-2. It says, "Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true proper worship." First off, I want to stop right there. We always think of worship as being like the time we're in church and maybe we're singing or praying or something like that. And this scripture here, I think, just really hits home to me. Actually, our worship is through our daily work.
Yeah, it's our life.
And we're giving that praise like, hey, you know, we are the hands and feet, and we were created by God. And so how are we serving, you know, and giving all the credit to God? And so that's our worship. But anyway, then it says in verse 2, do not conform to the pattern of this world. In other words, what the world wants to tell you, either about yourself or about your the situation of the world. Like, do not conform to this, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Yeah.
That's that change in perspective thing.
Right, yeah.
Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will.
Yeah.
That's just a powerful bit of scripture there.
So good. And it does. It kind of connects with our subject today on resilience. And resilience is defined as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, having that toughness or the ability to spring back. To kind of not get so blown around by whatever it is in this world that is coming after you. And, you know, I think of, when I think of being blown around, I can't help but think about those that have been in the path of the Hurricane Ian.
As we're recording this, that is
people are recovering from, right? And so we just want to, reach out and say we're praying for those who have been impacted by that storm, and it's rippling out into days to hurricanes and tornadoes in other parts of the country. And so how are we going to be able to withstand a terrible storm like that? That's what we're talking about today, resilience. And so I think it's pretty fitting that we're talking about that today on a day where, a lot of people are trying to clean up and recover from a horrible storm that has hit our nation.
Yeah, you mentioned a word, toughness. And we oftentimes think of toughness in terms of we connect it to strength. Boy, that guy is tough. But, tough is way more than just strength. Strength is the idea of, when we think about fitness, we think about the idea of how much can you lift, those kinds of things.
Because you're a strong man.
Because you're a strong man, all right? But toughness is your ability to keep lifting, to stay with it, okay? And so, in the fitness world, oftentimes we call that your work capacity. One guy might be able to go in there and lift 1,000 pounds, but another guy could go in and lift 100 pounds many, 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 many times over. And so, and again, depending on the type of work you do, like which one is most valuable, okay? And so it's that toughness that we have to at least have an understanding of. Do I keep breaking down with every little load that comes upon me? And if I do, how do I approach it differently, right?
Yeah.
So let's thank our sponsors.
Yes.
And then we'll get into a little bit of how we become tougher. I like that even better, how we become tougher.
I think we're changing the name of the show. I can see it now.
Tough enough. Tough enough. All right. We want to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions and Maxwell Construction for being sponsors of Rock Solid Radio. So we want to thank those community members who really just believe in good, solid family values, strong communities, and it shows. It shows on how they support missions like Rock Solid Families and Rock Solid Radio, but also, how they just contribute back to the community. So, and that's part of making a community more resilient.
Ooh, I like that.
Right?
Ooh, you're just tying it all in.
It's just, I'm on my game right now.
One of the other definitions I Googled and found about resilience is being resilient means facing difficulties head on instead of getting overwhelmed, feeling hopeless, or falling into unhealthy coping strategies. Having the mental toughness or reservoir of strength to handle stress and hardship. And so, hun, I picked today, the mug of the day says, "Don't give up the ship." You talked about your Navy cup last time, so I decided that I was going to get
I'm out of uniform.
You are.
I'm out of uniform.
I looked. I'm like, yeah, different. But mine is all about resilience today. Don't give up the ship. You like that? I'm really coordinating my.
If you like it, I like it.
I'm going to have to go out and buy some other mugs when we go in different topics. But so far, it's working. So.
Oh, by the way, okay, tangent.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
No.
So remember how you threw me under the bus a couple weeks ago about my M&M addiction?
You kind of confessed your M&M
Well, I
addiction.
confessed, but you had the whole container of it. And so we were in our gym working out, and I had one of our participants come in. He goes, "Man, I've heard about some of your issues." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, you got some problems, dude. And he's like, "I don't think I've ever heard anyone have those kind of struggles." And he's just going on and on. And finally he goes over to his gym bag and he pulls out a box of M&Ms. He's like, "Here, maybe this will help you."
I love it.
"Oh, you're just a dirtbag."
Love it. Yeah, so somebody is listening. And, speaking of that,
which is not helping my resilience right now, okay?
I'm surprised you didn't bring your M&Ms.
No, I'm on it. Hey, I'm clean. Like I've been clean. I've been on the bandwagon for at least a week.
A week or so, yeah. So speaking of that, we just spent the last month on Wednesday nights in our Families Rock series, and so we just want to shout out to all those parents and teachers that came week after week to learn and to be equipped in the skills of just how do we become healthy families, healthy parents, help to develop healthy children. And so we had a great time. We thank you for those. If you were listening, if you're listening and you were a part of that, and if that series or this show or your issues like your M&Ms, if they stir up something in you that you need help for, please reach out. That's why we're here. We do not have all the answers, obviously.
I don't think there's anybody at Rock Solid Families that can actually help my issue.
But if there's other issues besides M&M addiction that you have, please reach out because we believe that we're better together and that we can help one another, just like we seek that support and help from others too. So there is hope and help for something better. And we would love for you to reach out. You can call us at 812-576-ROCK. That's 812-576-7625. Or you can go to our website, rocksolidfamilies.org.
Yeah. Good stuff. Okay, so let's move on, and let's talk about resilience. But I'm going to also shift gears a little bit and talk about how this is not just something of the mind or the emotion. This is just of the body. This is how things work. And so I want to just relate some of this to working out and injuries of the body. Okay.
Are you putting your personal trainer hat on
right
now?
I'm tying it in.
Like you need to put it up there. Personal trainer time.
Mostly because it is coming together for a reason. Okay. So, oftentimes we go into the gym and we say, I need to get stronger. I have to get stronger. And we go and we start lifting those weights. And in particular, you've heard me before, if you've listened to past shows, talk about my knees. Okay.
Bad knees.
And, it took a long time to understand this, even though I was working out and a trainer and those kind of things. Like, why are my knees hurting? And I would stretch like crazy and do these things. And I've come to realize that I was always working on muscle building and endurance, a lot of endurance work, but failed to recognize the toughness of the connection, and that's called the tendon. And sometimes when you think about tendons, you think about the toughness. They are like that cord. And so then I had to do kind of a deep dive in, well, how do you build the toughness of a tendon? Because we can get a muscle big, but if we get a muscle big and we have not done our job to strengthen the tendon, we will constantly be dealing with injuries. And so those of you that might be, thus a lot of the knee issues, all right? And so those of you who may be dealing with, like, why am I always pulling a hamstring or rupturing the Achilles or something? It's because you have not done the work on keeping the toughness of, in this case, the tendon. And it's a very real part of training and working out. And, there's nothing worse than a guy who's in his 60s and he ruptures his Achilles tendon. And then he finds out he has surgery, and now he's laid up for 9 months because it seems to take forever for these tendons to heal. And so what we do is we stabilize that. In other words, we slow everything down. And then we slowly, in a very safe way, we start loading the tendon again, all right? And so we load it with heavy stress, in this case of weight, and then we relax it. And we don't do high reps, and it's the high reps. And I want to connect that because high reps is like busyness in life. High reps is like busyness in life. And so oftentimes when we see people breaking, most times it's not from one big tragic event. It can be, right? It can be. You can be running down to first base and just pull, a tendon. But most of the time it's from heavy reps. And you're so busy. You're running around, you're chasing kids, you're getting an education, you're running a business, all these things. And you do all of them kind of well, but nothing great. And then, like we've seen with COVID, and then you add, we've said this many times, COVID was not the source of our problems. It just exposed it. And it revealed our weaknesses because it was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was the last thing. It was that final thing that pulled the tendon and ruptured the tendon. And so I say that because if you don't understand all of the crazy busyness that you're doing, you will eventually rupture. And that can look ugly. Those are where divorces come through. That's where nervous breakdowns and panic attacks and all these things come into play.
Yeah. We've got couples and families and individuals who feel like they don't have any fight left in them. They don't have any strength left. They're ready to give up on their marriage, on their family, on their life. I mean, we have people who are willing to end it because they don't feel, they're so fragile, they're so weak, they're so vulnerable. They don't feel like they can take one more hit. And so whether it's a hurricane or tornado or whether it's a difficult relationship, we're just here to say you've got to really get to the root of how you're going to strengthen that. And, it does expose those weak areas, like you said.
Yeah, it's, we will often hear when people are getting to that frazzle point where it's just like they'll say, I feel like I'm doing a lot of things, but nothing well.
Yeah.
And that's, we talk about signs, okay? So in the gym, when we say, well, should I work through this pain or not? Everyone has aches and pains. And you say, well, should I work through this pain? You have to learn to recognize what the pains are.
What kind of pain?
Certain pains, like a stiffness pain, you go, well, I'll warm that up and work through it, and it tends to go away. But when you get like these sort of wake-up pains, it's like a sharp pain, like, ooh, where did that come from? That's a different message being sent to you. And if you don't recognize what some of the wake-up pains are of your busyness, right, where maybe you just don't have any energy to do anything anymore, or you're always grouchy, right? You're very moody, and it's not a one-day thing, right? You're starting to see this trend. We'll see couples come in and they'll say, really, it feels like for the last 3 months we've just been at each other's throat. Here's your sign.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Matthew 7:24-27, which I'm chuckling if you listened to last week's show. There's a whole story behind that I'm not going to tell now.
You have to go back and listen to the show.
Yeah. But, depending, that's really where Rock Solid Families and Rock Solid Radio got its name. What are you building your life and your home and your family on? Is it something of a rock that is strong and unshakable, or is it sinking sand? There's a reason why the very first people that are told to evacuate in a hurricane is people in mobile homes. They have no foundation, it's not built real well, and it's going to be the first thing that blows away when the storm comes. And so how strong and healthy is your life, is your home, and how storm-proof is it?
Yeah, the mobile home serves very, very well for what I'll call light living. Right?
Yeah.
For and it's got bedrooms and kitchens, and it's got all those things. But deep into the core of it, it's wanting.
It's vulnerable.
Right?
Yeah. And so when you go through something like a worldwide pandemic, it zaps a lot of our energy, and it exposes how little reserve and how fragile our lives are. And so, hon, I think about 1 Peter 5:8, where the word says, be alert and sober-minded, for your enemy prowls around, look around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Or in other words, be aware, because the next hurricane is about to hit. So
yeah, not only does he prowl around, but he sets these traps up in a way that you feel like you're out tricking him. You feel like you're getting by with stuff. So you get these false senses of success and accomplishment, like, man, look at me, I'm running this business, or my family's great, or I'm carrying 5 different jobs and I'm still able to do all this. And so we get this false sense of things being good.
Yeah. And so when COVID hit and everything just shut down and we were forced to slow down and stop, it really uncovered some uglies that had been kind of being covered up by our busyness and all those distractions. And we didn't have those, sports teams and all those work assignments and all of those events things. Like, we were at home, and all of a sudden we realized, like, some things are pretty fragile and some things are pretty broken. And we're going to have to do some work. And I want to kind of warn you on what are some of the warning signs that you are not as resilient and as strong and healthy as your life could be, or your relationships could be. Hun, what are some of the warning signs that kind of show us our resilience is pretty low?
Well, some of the aches and pains we talk about, like in the fitness thing, are definite warning signs. But when that relates to doing actual life, we'll see what kind of coping strategies we're putting into place. I used to take Advil once in a great while, and now I seem to have headaches almost every day, every other day, and I'm just eating a ton of Advil. I seem to find myself without any creativity. I used to go and build stuff in my workshop, and now I just don't even darken the door of the wood shop because I just don't have any energy to do that. I used to be kind of a social drinker, but honestly, I'm probably drinking a few beers every night these days. I come home and it's like, I'll have one maybe at dinner or after dinner. And before I go to bed, maybe I've knocked down 5 or 6 beers. And that wasn't my habit ever before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe, I am trying to look for other things that are trying to create some fun or excitement or fantasy in me. Maybe I'm, no one's around, and hey, check out this porn site that I've never looked at before. Or even gambling. I see guys dabbling in the gambling world because somehow it's not pornography. Pornography has gotten a lot of attention over the last few years, and you see some guys going, no, okay, I'm going to go ahead and put up a barrier. But again, they're still looking for something else that will just bring a little life back into them.
Yeah. Or maybe you used to once in a great while do overtime because somebody asked you to and it was really important. But now it's like you take any overtime and you're just always working. Or, this phone thing, you used to look at social media once in a while, and now every night you're scrolling for hours. And sometimes you're watching TV and you don't even sit around the dinner table with your spouse. You never used to do that. And so all of a sudden there's some really poor coping skills, like you said, are coming in, and we really are losing our first love and really the priorities of what brings health.
And so remember, like with each one of these things, what happens is we're losing our core toughness. The toughness that is going to help hold a marriage together, our mental health together, our kids, our job, keeping our job. Like, we're losing that toughness, and we don't realize it yet because the big stress hasn't hit us completely, right? The big storm hasn't hit, but we're getting a little bit frayed.
Some people might even be pushing back on you. I've had adult children push back on their parents when they feel like they're working too much or drinking too much or eating too much. We have some people who are emotional eaters, and they'll turn to food to kind of soothe whatever it is in them. So, Jeremiah 2:13, I love this verse, and I've used it before, but it says, "My people have committed 2 sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and then they've dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water." Your solution is not going back to your busyness and your distractions. Your solution is not eating more or drinking more, okay? Those are all broken cisterns, okay? That's yourself trying to hold water and trying to take care of it on your own. And like work and drinking, that's not how you get stronger and healthier. It's not forsaking that spring of living water, which God says is Him. He's the one that brings life. He's the one that nourishes our soul. And we have kind of forsaken that in our lives.
And I love that analogy because the idea there of a cistern is a set or finite amount of water, right? You can only put so much in. And it seems like such a great idea when that's what you need and it gets you through. But the idea of it getting cracks and it seeps out and it can't hold the water well and it's not enough. We keep running out. And in our area, we have some people who actually have to have their water trucked in and they run out of water because their cistern can't hold enough, versus the ever-flowing spring
of living water.
Yeah, and it's like, wow.
It never runs dry.
Yeah, it doesn't run dry, but I have to understand that concept.
Yeah.
Right?
So what we're going to do is, and we would love for you to get a piece of paper, because we're going to give you 5 steps to building resistance or rebuilding, not resistance, resilience.
Yeah.
Or rebuilding your resilience. If you feel like it's really faltered, like you said, the tendons have gotten weak. Okay. We're really not going to do a fitness class here, but you got
We could turn it into that.
That was a perfect analogy though, hon. That's a great thing. But here's step 1. Okay. So get that piece of paper out. I want you to identify what you're feeling that has been zapping your energy and lowering your resilience. Okay. And give that feeling a name. Okay, so identify the feeling and give it a name. So for instance, I've been feeling overwhelmed, or I feel scared, or I feel resentful, bitter. I feel guilty, So I want you to identify it and give it a name. There's some people, hon, especially the avoiders out there, who don't even know how to put a name to those feelings. They'll just say, I don't know. I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't know what's going on. And so it's really important to spend that time, give yourself some space to really think about, what am I feeling? Give it a name.
Okay, yeah. And then the next step after we've named that, I have to go to the why. So why am I feeling that?
Yeah.
Okay. And now, so we're looking for the reason or what the triggers have been or the stressors that have been put on, and I have to identify what those whys are.
Yeah.
Okay. And Hun, I want to actually add to that, like, we can't just say, why is this happening to me? Okay. We have to say why. Okay. And so, well, maybe it's because I put an artificial stress on myself of I have to be better or I have to work harder or whatever, or maybe life has just been more demanding. Okay. But I have to call that out. And then I have to go even a little bit farther and realize what I've been doing. This is step 3.
Yeah, but before we go to step 3, I need you to drill down to the real why, okay? Because sometimes, for instance, let's say you do something that makes me frustrated and resentment.
That would never happen. Bad
Never
example,
happen.
But, okay.
But let's say you did. But it's something, maybe you call me a name or you call me out on something, and I get really angry about that and really bitter. But sometimes if we drill down in the why, it's not about what Merle said. It's about maybe what your dad said when you were a kid. And so when Merle says that, it just triggers something in you. And that bitterness goes all the way back to your dad. And I've had that before with clients where, man, when we start calling that out, the real why, tears just start flooding out because it's like, oh my gosh, I've never realized that is what's been zapping my energy and stealing my joy.
And going to the deep why, all right, when you're going to that level, oftentimes, I would say most of the time, you have to be extremely insightful into yourself, or you need to get help to do that.
Yep.
Because what we do, especially if this is, later in your life, or if you've put that past event back, you could have buried that so far that you don't even acknowledge it as a problem.
Yeah,
okay.
you're right.
So that's not an easy dig to get to that why.
Right,
but you're
yeah.
right. That would be like, ultimately, if the pattern keeps revealing itself, then I need to go a little bit deeper and figure out, why does Merle calling me a name always trigger me back into being so upset?
That's such a great point, Hun. And I would literally, if you're taking notes, I would literally circle that step, because that's where you're stuck. If you don't know the why, like why, what is it in that is getting me so upset? What is that that's just breaking me down? And so that's where you got to get the help. But sometimes we can work through this on our own. And so step 3, if you've discovered the why, the real why, then step 3 is to kind of recognize what are the negative coping skills that you have been using to try to fix it, okay? Whether it be the alcohol, whether it be the food, whether it be the pornography. Recognize it, call it what it is, a negative coping skill. It's a broken cistern, right?
Yeah. And, all of us we all do that.
The M&Ms?
The M&Ms could be part of that.
What is that why,
I don't
honey?
know what that is.
What's the deep why?
Well, when I was little, my mom never let me have any candy. And now I can't stop eating it. That's not true
That's
at
not
all.
true, but that's funny, though. That'll be a good one.
Yeah. Sorry, Mom.
Tangent.
Didn't mean to throw you out there like that. But the idea here then is, once we started to see and we acknowledge, not only am I feeling this way, but these are the things I'm starting to do. Okay, so I'm in this funk. I finally have found out why I'm in this funk, or I'm trying to find it out. By the way, this is not necessarily a perfect sequential 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, this is kind of this discovery process. But now I've seen some of the things I'm doing to help me cope, and then at that point, I'm going to put a little sub-step in there.
Sub-step.
A sub-step, because our next step is, okay, now time to set healthy boundaries. But the sub-step is really, what am I going to do about this? Asking myself the question. And I always say that because you have to put yourself in problem-solving mode. And the more that you've been taken care of by things, people, you used to people rescuing you. And more than any other culture, we have rescued each other. We have insurance policies. We have all kinds of systems set up to rescue us, okay? And so much of this it's in my own head. It's in my own world.
Right.
It's not like I can get an insurance policy to save me from myself. Okay.
It's the we've lost the resilience, and that's funny that you bring that up, and I don't have it in our notes, but we've talked about this before. The most, the strongest tree out there, and I can't remember the name of it, is the one that's got the deepest roots, that has been hit the hardest by the wind. And I can't remember what tree that is.
Well,
but
really, that would be all trees, okay? All trees. Like, a very interesting thing with trees is that if you have a tree, if you have a forest, and the forest is large, and you take all the trees out of the forest except for one, so now you've got a field with one tree in the middle.
Yeah.
Chances are he won't last long because he's been buffered from the wind and from the storms.
Has low resilience.
His roots have been shallow, right? Just because he's now in more of a race to get the water, like all the other trees are trying to do, because he doesn't have to resist against the wind because all his brother trees are blocking that. And so any tree will do that. Any plant will do that. And obviously, I don't know what tree exactly you're speaking of, but that idea is us recognizing how we have been really so protected.
Yes.
By so many things. And I'm not trying to say that we should not have things like these protections around us, but if we don't acknowledge how fragile they have made us, then when the big storms do come, we're going to be more likely to have problems. And so I want to always have that question of not just now the why, but what can I do about this?
Yeah. This isn't necessarily a parenting show, but mom and dad, I need you to hear that, is that if we keep saving our kids, there's actually something called the snow plow parenting, where we literally just plow through all of the problems. We literally push aside all of the things our kids have to worry about. And it really does bring their resilience down because they've never been pushed against by anything or anyone. And so if you want to build resilience in your child, we talk about this in our parenting workshops all the time. You got to let them fail. You got to let them fall and have natural consequences for bad decisions or making mistakes. I'm not saying you have to throw them under the bus, but you got to help them build resilience and be able to say, you're okay, get back up, wipe yourself off. Because if they know you're going to come running every time they fall, then they'll cry and get all upset every time, knowing you're going to come to their rescue.
Yeah, and they won't be in a problem-solving ability because you are their problem solver. So, So once you start to ask yourself, what can I do about it? One of the things that we talk about doing frequently, and especially when our life's getting bombarded, is setting up the healthy boundaries.
Which is step 4.
Yeah, and we say that. Now, again, I want to be careful here because healthy boundaries is what we're saying, not boundaries. Because if I just set boundaries, that would be like putting the tree in a box so it was never stressed again. That's not what we're saying. Because we really believe we are called to be strong and go out into the wild to do life, okay? Versus I want to avoid all of the wildlife out there. I want to avoid the stresses. That's not what we're called to do at all, right?
Yeah. I would say those are like high walls, right? Like, oh my gosh, protection. And we're saying, no. Fences. We want fences where you can see out and do life, but that's not isolating us, okay? So we want to be able to handle and withstand the storm, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So the boundaries, and especially when we are at what we think is a very fragile breaking point, then I actually do have to be extremely intentional about a strong boundary so I can stabilize.
Yeah.
Okay. So remember, I told you before, like if I have a tendon issue, I have to stop running. Like I'll have to stop running for a bit because I have to stabilize that, let it get some healing. I've acknowledged, oh, yes, this pain is finally enough that I am going to have to back off. Now, my deal here is I don't want to say never running again, okay? Because if I'm born to be a runner, then like that's what I'm created to be, right? This is my way of worshiping. I'm using my body for how God created me. So the idea here is I want to stabilize with the healthy boundaries and then start to build up how can I get back out
Yeah.
and do it better? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I love healthy boundaries, and it's so important in our work. And so if you don't know how to do this healthy boundary thing, then we recommend the book Boundaries all the time. It's a national bestseller, New York Times bestseller. They've sold millions and millions of copies. You can find it on Amazon or on your local bookstore. But Boundaries by Dr. Cloud and Dr. Townsend would be a high recommendation if you really want to start protecting your life and getting some healthy boundaries in place. So that's step 4.
Can I go on a tangent?
Oh, goodness.
Come
yes.
on, let me do this.
Yeah.
And I want to go on this tangent because you and I have been having some talks. We talk about doing the 10-minute talk for all of our couples. Every night you do a 10-minute kind of talk, and we just roughly say 10 minutes, but the idea of you touch base. And sometimes we fall off the wagon of that, and we realize, we need to get back in touch here with each other. And we've been doing How We Love. And recently, we're talking about love styles and how one of my love styles, which is not always a great thing, is the avoider, okay? And you questioned me on it. You're like, why do you pull back from people or social situations? And I'm not trying to say, like what I do there is good or not. I'm just telling you, like, that's one of the things I do. And I've mentioned before my anxiety challenges that I've had. And I told you, I'm like, I think here's where that came from. The idea that when my tendons were rupturing, in other words, I was having panic attacks.
Yep.
I was coming unglued. I was and it wasn't because one single incident. It was just a lot of things all hit me at one time. And so I naturally then said, okay, I'm going to have to throw boundaries up. And one of them was saying no to people, saying like, no, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. And so part of that process of healing was putting up some of those boundaries. And now I will say, like, now I have to work to say, okay, we can't just stay in the basement.
We can't say no all the time.
We can't say no all the time.
Yeah.
But that's part of that response that has happened. And it's okay to go through that, but it's also, we want to keep growing.
Right. And same thing with like abuse. If you've been abused by someone, it doesn't mean you shut out everyone, right? You get healthy boundaries, you recognize healthy and unhealthy, and then you go back into the world with resilience. Okay. I think that's really why we have such an epidemic of bullying. I don't think it's that we've got meaner kids as much as we've got low resistance and low resilience in our kids. We just have not had them be able to push past the hard conversations and the difficult things people do and say to us. And so let's build that resilience in our family, in our kids, in our lives. And so step 5 is if you don't feel like you can make these healthy changes on your own, let's say this is a pattern you've had, like you had anxiety for the last 30 years, but you've learned how to manage it. It's not gone away completely, right? But it's something you've learned to manage. And so, we're saying get some professional help. Go to your pastor or a priest, call a therapist, get a coach, call us. We would love to help because there is better out there. And you can build resilience and have that healthy, strong life that you want.
Yeah, that's just great stuff. Honey, as you were talking there, I'm thinking about, you said the word abuse, but I'll go even more specifically because I think of how challenging this could be if a girl or a lady were sexually abused or she was raped.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then someday she gets into a relationship and the one thing that was done to her was done in such a violent, terrible, disrespectful way.
Yep.
And that's the same exact act, the physical act that now is supposed to be loving and intimate with this person. And right away we see that it just triggers up all kinds of bad things. And like you're saying, like, this is a sign that we deal with this.
Right. It doesn't mean your husband's an abuser. It means that you need help.
Yeah.
Your resilience is low.
Yes.
And why is that? Well, of course, you've experienced great trauma. And so get some help for that. Heal that right. Build your resilience and be able to have a life and a relationship that is thriving and healthy. And that's what we want for everybody because we know it's out there. We know it's possible. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get tough.
Let's get tough. Yeah.
All right. So we want to thank you guys. Hopefully this show is helpful to you. Do us a favor and listen to the shows, share the shows, comment on the shows, right? Like obviously we're always a work in progress. So if you've got some input, something that you've done that's worked for you, don't keep it a secret. We'd like to know.
Absolutely.
Okay? These things can be really helpful. We also want to thank again our sponsors, Casey's Outdoor Solutions and Maxwell Construction, for just being part of our support system here as well. So let's get ready to sign this off. Let's go get tough.
For sure. So thank you so much for listening to Rock Solid Radio, building a stronger community, one family at a time. Go make it a great day. Rock Solid Radio wants to thank Maxwell Construction, who has been our sponsor since the very beginning. For over 30 years, Maxwell has delivered the highest quality projects by holding to their core values of customer satisfaction, positive attitude, respect, and excellence. So if you have any kind of commercial construction need, give Maxwell Construction a call today at 812-537-2200.